Okay. Hello and welcome, everybody, to Dark Alignment Podcast. I am Brittney.
And I'm Amy, also Eruca Rose on Instagram.
I'm at Britt Oakley on Instagram and all the other places. You can follow us in many, many places. We're on, at Dark Alignment on Instagram. We're at Alignment Dark on TikTok. We're on Twitter, which I think we're at Alignment Dark.
I think it's, TikTok and Twitter. But yes,
we'll
so
post
we're on the things. They're all links are in the description of wherever you're watching this. Also, if you hop on, we got a link tree with all of it.
That's true. We do have link tree. So make sure you like, follow, subscribe. You can also join our Patreon if you want some extra content, some bonus content. So we're everywhere. We're on all the platforms. So check us out. And last time we were here, we did an emergency episode. We came in to talk about the case of the missing Morgan Nick. And it's interesting kind of how that all happened. You've watched the episode or listened to the episode if you haven't. And if you aren't familiar with that case, it's going to be big. There's so many things developing right now. Mm-hmm. But the documentary that we talked about, it did air, but it only aired locally on a local news channel. One time. They said they will not be replaying it, and I know why. Like, I missed it, and I was really upset about it.
And we were both upset. She's definitely probably a little more upset.
Definitely.
I was mad.
But I understand because I know that their whole motivation for doing that was to get more leads locally. And I feel like what they're going to do is they're going to finish out the documentary once this case is solved, and that will be the point that we will probably see it on a bigger platform because it is very close. I feel like that's probably why they're going to hold off. The purpose right now...
that's it. That would be amazing.
Yeah. The purpose right now, I think, is just to continue to educate people on the case and also to get new leads, specifically with the pickup truck that was seen in the parking lot taking Morgan when she was abducted. So the red truck with the white camper shell in 1995. Anybody, if you lived in the state of Arkansas at that time, and you know anybody who drove a truck like that, like, they are taking tips right now. This is an open case, open investigation. We're going to keep giving updates as things unfold. But that's all we really got for now. I did see follow the Morgan Nick Foundation also on Instagram. They post a lot of great things about what they're doing and the work they're doing, and also updates on the case. So, but this time, we are going to be talking about a super heavy hitter. We're going to talk about Ted Bundy today, and this is one that we've held off on for a while.
We have. We've known we wanted to do this one in a long time, and we did not.
We have not done it yet. I just knew the level of research involved in this was kind of going to be a little bit extra. This is going to be a little bit longer just to tell the story because there's so much, and I'm only going to do really a high-level overview still. I'm not going to go into detail about the actual crimes because they're fucked up and terrible, and you can find them anywhere if you want to know more about them, but and I'll tell you more about the media and things too. But real quick, I'm going to go ahead and start off with my sources here. My favorite source always is Wikipedia, so please donate. I've already made my annual donation. I feel good about it. There's a bunch of other sources too that I'm going to list, but a big reason of why we are doing this episode is it's dedicated to our friend Courtney over at the Astral Chat podcast.
Check them out.
Please check them out. And if you haven't heard of our holiday crossover episode that we did with them, that one's a lot of fun. We talk about Ted Bundy on the episode because he's Courtney's birthday twin.
Yeah, I was like, this birthday, I recognize it. I've done a lot of readings for Courtney.
Yes, so that's kind of like a weird connection there. So Courtney, shout out to you as well, Britt. We love you guys. But claim to fame on Ted Bundy, how you will probably know him. He was a prolific American serial killer who kidnapped, raped, and murdered numerous young women and girls during the mid to late 1970s. And before his execution in 1989, he confessed to over 30 homicides that he committed in 7 different states over just a 4-year span. It was kind of a small window of time. So he was very active. Often at times it was one victim a month, kind of on average, which is fucking terrifying. And they all, looked almost identical. They were all around the same age. It was just, that's when there's something really fucking terrible going on. The actual number of victims, though, is presumed to be a lot higher. There are actually still many open cases that are still being linked to Ted Bundy to this day, again, he was executed in 1989. And they are still, there's still unsolved cases that are being attributed to him. He was also, one thing that makes him just like so terrifying is that he's also known for being handsome, charming, charismatic, extremely intelligent. That's really not what you think of when you think of a psychopath and a serial killer. Like, you do think of somebody who's like that creepy guy, not the really well-spoken, well-dressed guy that you could take home to your parents and they would love him kind of guy. Like, but that's what he was. He was very much a wolf in sheep's clothing all the time. So there's a ton of movies and all kinds of media and shit about him. So you've probably already heard about just how poor and unpopular he is. So, another interesting thing, when you're talking about serial killers, there's different categories, and he actually fits into 2 different ones. So he is the sexually sadistic serial killer and also a necrophilic serial killer.
Wow.
So, it's just really interesting that you would have both, because we had somebody like Ed Gein, who was, in the necrophilic category. Jeffrey Dahmer would cross over into both, where he was sexually sadistic as well as necrophiliac. But it's just an interesting for them to be in multiple categories like that. So, media as fuck. Here we go. So we've talked about her before. I watched a ton of interviews with her today. Author Anne Rule. She's a true crime writer. She's amazing. She wrote the book Small Sacrifices about Diane Downs. So we talked about that in season 1, episode 5. But Anne Rule also wrote the infamous book The Stranger Beside Me, about her experience of knowing Ted personally. She actually worked with him and described him as a psychopath, a sociopath, who took pleasure in other people's pain and the control he had over his victims. There are a total of 7 other books about Ted Bundy, also 7 movies, including the most recent one that we were just talking about before we started recording with Zac Efron. There are 5 separate television series about him. There's an Amazon Prime series called Falling for a Killer, that's where his longtime girlfriend Liz talks a lot about him. She's interviewed in that. There's just so much out there, so much on YouTube. So this is probably not a new story to you. But we're going to go ahead and get into the young life of Ted Bundy and kind of just uncover how he came to be.
Yes, I'm very curious.
And what shocks me a little bit about his upbringing is that it was not particularly horrific in comparison to so many other people who grow up to become violent criminals. Like, it's almost like you would expect it to be so much worse for how he turned out. So it's interesting. And not that it's without issues, but I find that interesting. So Ted was born in a home for unwed mothers. In 1946. His father's identity has actually never been confirmed. And the thing about his mother being sent there, she wasn't a teen mom. She was 23. But you have to think this is 1946, where it's a big deal to be an unwed mother, and you gotta go.
Yeah.
But I guess when I initially learned that, I assumed she must have been very, very young. And even by those standards, 23 in 1946,
still,
that's considered you should have already had kids years and years to get your clock's ticking.
Okay.
So that's interesting to me as well. So nobody quite knows who his biological father is. It was suspected by some people that it was his maternal grandfather, but it's not confirmed. Okay. So this is just rumor mill kind of going.
That's interesting.
Lots of speculation there. So interesting, but he actually lived with his grandparents for the first 3 years of his life because of the social stigma associated with being an unmarried mom. So it was very fucking scandalous. And for a long time, he thought his mother was his older sister. He was raised to believe that she was his older sister. He eventually found out when he was around the age of 23, which is interesting because that's how old his mom was when she had him. He found his birth certificate, and I'm sure that was not an easy thing to deal with. He definitely resented his mom his entire life because of this. He never got to know who his dad was. His mom was a lie, so that was, probably pretty traumatic. He did like his grandparents, though, from what people say. He respected his grandfather and really kind of clung to him, but also claimed that this man was a horrible, like, abusive racist who beat them all and the family pets. So I'm not sure. I don't really know. It does seem like there was quite a bit of violence. His grandmother, I have a very soft spot for her. She was actually very timid and had to get electroconvulsive therapy or ECT treatments for her clinical depression. I'm very familiar with this. My grandmother has the same diagnosis.
Really?
And still gets ECT treatments to this day. She's been getting them for about the last 16 years. So I know a whole lot about this diagnosis and a whole lot about this type of treatment. It's only reserved for cases of extreme depression.
Wow.
So I really feel for this little woman and hope she didn't have a horrible abusive husband. It sounds like she kind of did. Regardless, Ted's already a problem. So this is disturbing as fuck. In his early years, the adults around him were already noticing, like, there's something not quite right here. A female family member recalled a time when she woke up from a nap only to find herself surrounded by knives, like kitchen knives, all around her, like facing her, like pointing at her. And just like a little Ted standing there smiling, just like enjoying it and being real creepy. So, he was also kind of passed around a lot, like between his mom and his grandparents and then like a random cousin. And then when he got a little bit older, his mother got married. And this was when Ted was 5. And this is actually when he was adopted and got the last name Bundy. He was not born with that last name. It was an adoptive name.
Do you know what the...
It started with a C.
Okay.
Crowell. I wish I would have made note on it. So somebody feel free to comment and call me on that.
I can look it up really fast.
Can you look it up really quick? I want to see how close I am. His birth name. I want to say it was like Cowell. I don't know. We've got our team doing the research here on the site.
Cowell.
Oh, what? Well, all right, cool. I guess my brain is more trustworthy than I give it credit for sometimes.
Wow.
So yeah, he didn't become Ted Bundy, Theodore Bundy, until he was 5. And then his mom and new stepdad went on to have 4 more kids. So he's the oldest, and he's the only one who's like the blended child, and it's not his dad. He doesn't know who his dad is, and like, so it's an interesting situation.
That is interesting.
But of course, he kind of like isolated himself and stayed pretty distant. I think he probably like assumed the role of an only child. That's kind of what it seems like. And then in later interviews, Ted talks about, like, he didn't understand friendships. He didn't understand how to create them. But by all accounts, he was extremely sociable and charismatic and, like, had lots of acquaintances. I feel like that really is... He didn't know how to form meaningful relationships. He can form surface level, superficial relationships, but because he, like, his inability to have real feelings, like all he could do was emulate emotions. He was not ever able to actually feel them himself. So I'm sure that makes like maintaining real relationships impossible if you can't, relate to people and you don't have empathy. So, and that's typical of a psychopath. They're very emotionally shallow people. Again, they just know how to mimic human emotions. They don't actually have them.
Right.
And they're usually really intelligent, very linguistically gifted, which Ted was. He could charm anyone he knew. It was all for personal gain and wasn't about building relationships with people at all. That was not his goal. Any relationships he did build were to serve a purpose, his own interest. So it was all about manipulation for him. So... Evolution of a fuckface. Here we go. So, you might be wondering, did Ted Bundy have any talents or special skills, perhaps? Well, he did.
Okay.
It's random as fuck.
All right.
I thought this was kind of hilarious. He got really into downhill skiing.
Okay.
So, to follow his passion... He found a way to make skiing a regular part of his life by using stolen equipment and forged lift tickets. So this is kind of like his first entry into this path of crime. He was still in high school. And then he was also arrested at least twice on suspicion of burglary, auto theft. So he was committing these like more petty crimes, these smaller crimes, again for personal gain and just to do what he wants and get what he wants. But his record was actually wiped clean when he turned 18. So those didn't follow him, but he was already, you can already see the behavior where he's dipping into that like criminal type lifestyle. So now, Bundy, the college years. Again, he was really intelligent. That's part of what makes him so scary, because he's always a step ahead of everybody. He was always a step ahead of the police, a step ahead of his victims. People described him as being both smart and aggressive, which is, an intimidating combination, I think. He found himself in and out of college. Like, he was would go for a while and come out for various things too. So he studied a lot of different subjects, everything from Chinese to psychology. And then after he got a psychology degree, he was going to law school.
Of course.
So he was an honor student. He made excellent grades. His professors loved him. So it's really, really interesting. But also during this time, he worked at Seattle, Washington Suicide Hotline Crisis Center. And this is actually where he met and worked with Anne Rule.
Whoa.
So they're working to help people. Meanwhile, he's also, like, hurting people.
This
and
seems like, something that someone who didn't experience human emotions, like, would do, is try to learn. That's where you learn the most about
absolutely
the way other people's minds are working.
Yep.
And I know that they tend to not do well in therapy and abuse therapy.
That is exactly what I was about to say. I've seen interviews with therapists who were working with Ted Bundy, and the thing with a psychopath is they really are great. They're so good at manipulating people that therapy just teaches them how to be better psychopaths and better manipulators. And that is, like, his psychologist would actually say, like, I could feel him starting to manipulate me, and I had to, like, stop it. Like, I had to, like, get out of it. So he's dangerous. I've watched tons of interviews with him, and it's the way he speaks and the way he goes about things. It's so crafty. Like, it's knowing what he's doing and watching him do it is a really fascinating experience because you can see the effect he has on everyone around him, and he's in control in the way that he makes people think they're in control. And it's so
just flip the script.
It's super gross. He was also, like a lot of psychopaths, involved in politics on and off. And guess who he has this in common with? Do you remember? This should be a quiz. I'm going to put this on a quiz.
I don't remember people's names or stories or...
I love you.
I remember... no.
Okay. All right. Well, he has this in common with John Wayne Gacy. And Ted Bundy was a proud Republican, I just want to say. So, if you're a Republican, Ted Bundy was also...
There's your guy.
Just so you know. He's your guy. Sorry, I just had to. I just thought that was really funny because it was so openly, like,
You're just
put
really
on everything
into
that
it.
he was a Republican. And then I actually saw somebody post a bumper sticker, and I reshared it because it was so funny. It just said Ted Bundy was a Republican. And I shared it.
That's the whole bumper sticker?
I was like, it's just a fact that's funny.
Oh, I mean, there's definitely some wild... liberals too, so
there's wild everything.
It's
but
just...
the fact that I saw that on a bumper sticker, if I saw that, like, out in the world, I saw somebody reshared it, like somebody posted it that they saw in someone else's vehicle.
It is funny.
So funny. I want to, if it was your bumper sticker, please DM me because I think you're funny. Anyway, classic case of a psychopath. Loves politics. I don't really understand. I mean, I do understand the connection. Because most presidents and successful leaders are considered corporate psychopaths. It's a common personality trait.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a book about it called Snakes in Suits.
Because their emotions aren't holding them back from, like, pursuing.
Right! Exactly! And they're smooth talkers, and they're charming, and they're...
Yeah.
Yep. So, anyway, at this point, he met and fell in love with a woman named Elizabeth. Or Liz, but before her, this is something I did not know about. Before her, he actually did have one other meaningful relationship.
Really?
So his whole life, he doesn't really date. He doesn't really have relationships like through school or whatever. But he did, his very first girlfriend, her name was Stephanie Brooks. And he dated her for about a year. He was very serious about her. This was rumored before he had started killing. But I guess she broke it off. He was a lot more serious than she was. she kind of thought he was like immature, not going anywhere, like not really doing much with his life. And then after this is when he like started all the college things and started like really going for it.
Oh.
And then when he met Liz, he was actually still talking to Stephanie and hoping to kind of like win her back.
Mm-hmm.
But he ends up being with Liz. And also Stephanie Brooks is the girl that all the victims look like.
Oh my god.
Liz actually looks a lot like her too. They're all like the dark-haired, long-haired, middle part.
Wow.
Very similar, like beautiful, dark-haired girls. So all around the same age. So it's really fascinating. But Stephanie Brooks was a new person that I had learned about. I've always heard about Liz. And although I'm sure it's because, you know, Stephanie Brooks was a girlfriend early on and for a shorter period. But he actually, Liz and he had dated his entire crime spree and after he went to prison the first time. Mm-hmm. And the movie that Zac Efron does, like where he plays Ted Bundy, the whole thing is from her perspective, which is really cool. It's really well done. Again, can't say enough like how good that movie is if you get a chance to watch it. It's a different side of the story that you don't often get a chance to hear or see unless you seek out stuff with her in it. So, but later he starts like skipping classes, and even while he was in law school, like his grades start to slip, and that's also when women start to really go missing. So it seems he's
he
distracted.
Gets stressed and then
He's probably a little distracted.
Oh yes. Or that.
So let's talk trigger warning. I haven't done a trigger warning yet, but we're getting into kind of the gross areas. So we're going to talk about him being very garbage. Again, he's this handsome, charismatic guy, and he exploited those traits to win the trust of his victims and all the people around him. So, and nobody even really knows when or where he started his spree. There's different versions of his story that he's told once he was caught. But what we do know is that he approached his victims in public places, which is pretty brazen. He was usually faking some sort of an injury or a disability.
Oh.
Sometimes he was impersonating an authority figure. And he would knock his victims unconscious and take them to secluded locations, rape them, strangle them, usually bludgeon them. That was his favorite, which is it just speaks to the violent nature. There's so many different methods of murder that we see with these different serial killers, and you know the common ones for people who are like to have these personal attacks would be strangulation and manual strangulation, and also to not leave evidence and not, you know. Ted Bundy didn't seem concerned at all with that fucking shit. Like, he is bludgeoning someone is so
no big deal.
Violent and insane, and also think about the amount of evidence going everywhere. And it's not a clean, it's so violent.
And what years were they?
1974 to 1978.
So they had some, like...
Oh, they had DNA.
They had testing.
It wasn't great. They could do blood typing. I think they actually had DNA. They couldn't do like mitochondrial DNA, and they couldn't do anything with hairs, because they did find hairs that they were saying were similar to this, similar to that. But they couldn't, you know, conclusively test like we can now. So this is, but they definitely, like, he was absolutely leaving lots of evidence, getting evidence everywhere. If you think about from the perspective, the way certain killers choose their approach is to minimize that type of evidence. Yeah, and he did not care. He was just very violent. And so one of the things that he did a lot, he would wear a sling to act like he was injured.
Wow.
And then he would like drop his books, or he would like ask for help, or he would make him seem like he was harmless and subdued somehow. And get these young women to come near his vehicle and to come help him. And then that's when he would attack them. As soon as they were, like, vulnerable and, like, being nice. And also, he's, like, handsome. So I'm sure that by 1970 standards, I think he's really fucking gross. But perhaps by 1970 standards, he's not a scary-looking person, is, I guess, the best way to put it. So during the first half of his 1974 semester, tons of female college students are disappearing. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but about one a month. The police didn't have very many leads. He never wore a disguise, though. So this is what's so interesting. The reports were a brown-haired male with various injuries. Again, a sling, crutches. One time he even used a fucking leg cast, which is gross. And something even grosser is during this time, he is the assistant director of the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory? What am I writing? Commission.
I know what you're saying.
He wrote a fucking pamphlet for women on rape prevention.
Of course.
It pisses me
expert.
off.
Mm-hmm.
It just pisses me off so bad.
Yeah, it's infuriating. It's definitely infuriating.
It makes me really, really mad. Okay.
And it shows you that the type of people who are victim blaming are perpetrators too. You know, or they have it in them, or they've thought about it and didn't think it, you know, or they have friends that they want to defend. Like,
for him, it's like he was almost getting off on the fact that he was pulling this off and fooling everyone. He's smarter than everyone and just loves that. Made him feel really powerful. And it's so gross. He also worked at the Department for Emergency Services, and that is the agency that searched for all the missing women that he was abducting, raping, and murdering. So he's involved. He's understanding where they're at in investigation. That's really common, too. You see this with serial killers and serial offenders, that they will be too involved and get overly...
And get really involved in that. And why not? He feels like he can.
Right.
And it's more... He thinks he can do everything.
Well, more than anything, it helps them stay one step ahead.
Yeah.
Even people who aren't psychopathic will do this just because they want to know how much the police know. And that's a way to do it, is to infiltrate that. And that, a lot of people in law enforcement who commit crimes, like, that's why they can continue to evade, is for that same reason. So it's gross. So people were terrified, especially women. This is all over the news. There's panic. Law enforcement's under a lot of pressure. Everybody wants him off the street. Like, fucking go get this guy. And again, there's so many similarities between the victimology of the attacks that they were able to link them. The disappearances were all taking place at night. They were usually near, like, a construction area. Like a place where there's some ongoing construction work. They were usually within a week of midterms or final exams, which is interesting. All of the victims were wearing slacks or blue jeans. And at most of the crime scenes, there were sightings of a man in a cast or sling driving a brown or tan Volkswagen Beetle. So his crimes continued to escalate with the violence, and he was becoming more reckless. He attacked 2 young females in broad daylight with a ton of witnesses at a park. Like, and then he repeated it again at another park. No. Like, with all the media coverage and everything, like, witnesses started coming forward. Police finally had a good description of him, and they were able to create a composite sketch. So, like, his day, when he started day creeping, that was kind of where he was really
day creep,
kind of fucked things up. And he was giving out his real name. So he was approaching all these different women and talking to them that day and being like, "Hi, I'm Ted." Like, he was that's how fucking arrogant he was. He was giving out his real name. So the tip line is blowing up, and even Liz, his longtime girlfriend, and Ann Rule, and another coworker, a psych professor, and other acquaintances, like, tons of people start recognizing the sketch and the car. The car specifically, it's really striking. It's like this, like, it's almost like a nude color of, like, a Volkswagen Bug. So it's a really, like, it's noticeable. It's really, really gross. But everybody's like, yeah, I know that guy. And then the police had a really hard time believing that someone so clean cut, college student, like, they just thought that this could not be the person they were looking for. So his appearance definitely helped him get away with a lot here. So, because this is, like, everything going on, he changes scenery. He goes to Utah. He actually ended up going to a lot of different states. He was in, like, Utah for a while. He had been in Seattle, Washington for a while. He was in Colorado for a while. So he's just kind of moving around. But he's slow. He's still committing these serial murders everywhere he is. So, but
I was about to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Based on his shirt.
So, of course, back then, that's the other thing is, like, these different jurisdictions in different states certainly were not sharing any data. So, they were finally able to connect it all.
Huge crow in the tree out there, by the way.
I've been trying to befriend the crows, and I've been feeding them.
They're her favorite.
They are my favorite. So, I've been trying to make friends with crows, so that makes me really happy.
They found you.
They found me. Yay!
I don't usually see crows over here. I usually see other birds.
Yes.
They went away.
It's going well. Thank you. Thank you for telling me. So yeah, basically he's relocated. He's super frustrated from trying to like lay low. He's not doing well in school, and it's like a big blow to his ego. He's all fucking frustrated. Mm-hmm. So of course he's gonna start up his spree again and start killing again. He keeps it up again like every 2 weeks for several months. Like. He gets so wrapped up in it. In an interview several years later, Ted actually described his post-mortem rituals with the corpses.
No.
That's pretty gross. Are you ready?
Very detailed.
Some of these rituals include shampooing their hair, putting on makeup. He often decapitated his victims. That was actually one of the things he was very known for. God. Like, there were a lot of victims whose bodies were found without the head, and the heads had not been recovered. It's really gross. He actually would revisit some of his corpses and have post-mortem sexual contact with them. So he's super fucking disgusting. And... you know, I mentioned this before, but, like, sometimes he would pretend to be an authority figure. So, one of his last times that he, like, before he was finally caught, he pretends to be a cop. Doesn't go well for him, actually. This young woman that he abducts, he tells her basically, like, oh, somebody's tried to break into your car. We need to go down to the station and fill out a report, and I'm going to drive you in my Volkswagen Beetle. And she's like... okay. And so she gets in his car. She realizes they're not going the way to the police station. And as soon as she, like, questions it, he handcuffs her. So he put both the cuffs on one wrist on her, so she fought, and he did not get them all the way on her, so she escapes. She fucking jumps out of the moving car. She, gets help. They end up finding the key to the handcuffs in a parking lot, and it turns out he had, there had been another woman who'd gone missing that same night.
Whoa.
From the parking lot. So, can you fucking imagine? So, she later identifies him. She got a really good look at him because he approached her. And she talked to him. So, she saw him when she was already, like, calm and had no reason to be afraid of him, and then got in a car with him, and then he attacked her. So, she had a lot of contact. And again, he didn't wear disguises. So she easily identified him in a lineup. She also testified against him. So he's definitely fucked now when, you know, the police catch up to him, detain him. He was charged with kidnapping. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. So this is all sounding really good. They also knew he was linked to other murders, so they wanted to
they knew that something else. Yeah.
So they had him on this kidnapping, but they knew he had done a lot more, so they were glad to at least have him to, you know, investigate all his other shit. And then, of course, after he was detained, he opted to serve as his own legal counsel. He fired his attorneys and is just going to represent himself. And during this, he successfully escaped police custody during the recess of his preliminary hearing.
Whoa.
He jumped out of a 2-story fucking window, which is just nuts. And then he spent the next 6 days as a fugitive of justice before being pulled over by the police for driving erratically in a stolen car. So, didn't go great. Also, like, initially when police caught up with him and they detained him, they found a fuck ton of evidence in the car. There was, like, a ski mask. There was, like, you know, like, murdery stuff.
Yeah, obvious stuff.
Very, very murdery stuff in his car. So he was, like, super fucked, tries to escape, gets detained again. And it's just so ridiculous. He actually is very famous for escaping another time once they actually had him in prison. So he already escapes once just for the preliminary hearing. They don't even make it through the fucking first hearing before they lose him. Mm-hmm. I think it was they let him go to the bathroom or they let him go somewhere.
And he was like,
he fucking jumps out a 2-story window and makes himself, he was such a chameleon. He was able to just like pass himself off as like, I'm supposed to be here. Insane. So after they caught him, he escapes again, and this is nuts. So he ends up losing 30 pounds, which on he's a smaller, like, well, okay, so he's between 5'8" and 5'10", not a big guy. So losing 30 pounds made him pretty thin. He said it was like a food boycott because it was like the food was gross. Like, he made it a big thing, you know, like made it really dramatic, made a big deal. But he was actually starving himself so that he could fit through a hole in the ceiling or in like the air duct that he had been like carving in his spare time.
Wow.
So his whole goal is to be thin enough to slide through it, and that's exactly what he did. He slips through the fucking walls. He walks out of the prison. Walks out. So this is really bad. Because this escape was on New Year's Eve. Too, so people are also distracted, and like he knew how to time it.
It'd be hard to get a big news story out right then.
And also people are probably distracted in the prison. He just knew right when to do this. So he's out there for weeks, and nobody knows where he is, and there's no new crimes, and everybody is terrified that there's a serial killer on the loose, and nobody knows where the fuck he is. He was laying low. And he was out for about a month before he, of course, couldn't fucking take it anymore and has to start committing his crimes again. So, this is so bad. During this escape from prison, he commits one of the most disturbing crimes.
No.
Yeah. This one, Courtney actually has like 2 degrees of separation from one of the survivors of this attack. It was, I believe, her mom's friend. Was a survivor and actually testified and everything. Like,
that's...
Yeah. Oh my God. So, this is really bad. So, he breaks into the Chi Omega sorority house and he brutally sexually assaults and bludgeons 4 young women within about 15 minutes. He went room to room and he bludgeoned them, his weapon, like a fucking tree branch, to beat them to death. Like, he didn't actually kill all of them. He severely injured several of them. And it was really, really disturbing. So 2 of his victims died as a result of the attack. The other 2 were seriously injured, like I said. The same night, Ted broke into the home of another young woman and repeated the attack on a new victim. She actually managed to survive her injuries as well. He would go on to rape and murder his final victim, a 12-year-old girl, before police could finally apprehend him and take him back into custody. So the thought of those 4 brutal attacks in 15 minutes, the level of rage that somebody would have to have, it's a fucking nightmare. It's disgusting. So, more things. Ted talking about himself. This is every interview that he does. He knows how fascinated people are with him, and he enjoys kind of playing it up. He once called himself the most cold-hearted son of a bitch you'll ever meet. In a 1981 interview about his crimes, he was quoted as saying, "It hurts you. I guess I'm in the enviable position of not having to deal with guilt." He literally had no fear of consequences, which you can see during his prison escape. Like, he didn't actually lay low. Who knows how long he could have been out there if he could have not continued to commit crimes. So he could not stop himself, obviously. He just really didn't make attempts to stay hidden so much. He just tried to more so blend in, which is interesting. He used fake identities. He stole vehicles. He committed burglaries. He did a lot more violent things. Overall, any attempts to conceal himself were done in an effort to continue attacking women, and it had nothing to do with avoiding punishment at all. So thank goodness they do catch him, because he certainly wasn't concerned at all with consequences. It was almost like he knew he could just get away with it more. He's like, well, I can just escape prison. Like, they can't keep me in there. Like, he just really felt so powerful, even when they had taken his power away, as much as, like, you can take someone's power away, like putting someone in jail. There's really no further, like, removal of your power than being in prison, and he still was like, nuh-uh, I'm just gonna walk out. And he did, and it's crazy. So, all right, now let's get to the trial. This whole thing is crazy. This whole thing is crazy. It's got to get a little crazier. Okay. So you're going to be interested in this for sure.
There's more interest?
Oh, yeah. We're getting into the trial. We haven't even really talked about the trial.
Oh, my God.
Again, during the trial, Ted fucking represents himself. He's being a super piece of shit. He's actually allowed to cross-examine witnesses, his own victims and survivors.
Did he just talk his way into that?
I don't know how they allowed it, but it was very not good. Very traumatic for the victims to have the person who tried to murder them fucking cross-examining them. It should never have been allowed, but, like, again, this is the fucking 70s. There's a lot different. Getting to the trial portion, this is equally crazy to everything else, so just get ready. So after, you know, the trial and the convictions, he was actually only charged with 3 murders in total, even though there were presumed to be a lot more than 30. He confessed to at least 30, but only convicted of 3. Again, once you're sentenced to... He was sentenced to death. Once you're sentenced to death, it's kind of like continuing to drag it out and continuing to accrue court costs and appeals and exhaust all these things. Like, it's not the best way to spend the state's money, especially when they already know, and the number of victims in this case. So there are still to this day several cases that are continuously being linked to Ted Bundy and attributed to him. It's wild. There are still a lot of open cases and open investigations in this. So all these years later, it's really, really, really crazy. So, convicted, sentenced to death by electrocution. So the electric chair, that is now not a thing. We actually looked it up. Or no, we looked up something different. We looked up firing squad.
Yep, we did.
We wanted to know about the firing squad. But electrocution is considered cruel and unusual punishment. Firing squad in some states... Is that a good... Okay. Okay.
Okay, yeah, still going. We're having some camera issues.
Yeah, I'm paranoid about the camera not continuing.
We keep having to, like, stop and start. So.
Yeah, so making sure we're good. Sorry if I call out anything. It's clearly just being observant and scared. So, anyway, back to this. Death by electric chair. Firing squad is still allowed in a couple of states, which is interesting. It's still allowed in Utah and Mississippi and Oklahoma, which is just...
It just seems strange. Like,
we were talking about the different forms of punishment that are no longer allowed, and that was one that I thought was super interesting.
It is interesting.
Firing squad. So while Ted is on death row, he continues to be super fucking manipulative, and he ends up manipulating a past friend and love interest named Carol Boone. She visited him and aided him, like, since day one, since the very beginning of his arrest time. He had known her prior, so he had been charming her for a long time, but of course he was with Liz for so long. You know, once Liz realized he was actually guilty of these crimes and just dealing with that, like, she was done engaging with him, and
she was done.
But he's like, cool, I've got Carol, it's fine. He's just such a piece of shit. And then during the penalty phase of his trial, Ted shocks the court by using a loophole in Florida law to validate a marriage between himself and Carol by simply declaring the marriage in the presence of a judge in open court. So they were legally married under Florida law. Great job, everyone. Although the marriage still didn't permit conjugal visits, he didn't get that perk on death row, Ted still becomes a father while awaiting execution. So that happened. Carol actually continued to believe in Ted's innocence until he made a full confession of his crimes the night before he was put to death. So, his ability to charm and con and manipulate everyone around him remained fully intact until his last moments on Earth. And even throughout his confessions, Ted never assumed any responsibility. He never expressed remorse. He didn't have any, so he's not going to express that. Again, no feelings. Instead, he did a lot of blaming. So he blamed his upbringing. He blamed his mom and her concealment of his father's identity. Of course. He blamed the media. He blamed his victims. He blamed society. But he definitely blamed pornography. And we talked a little bit about this as well.
I feel like he's really just playing to his audience on whatever excuse he thinks will work in the moment with the people he's around or interviewing him or anything. Like, and especially in the court system. There's like all these people trying to kind of rehab these, and I say that in quotes for those just listening, like air quotes, like you can rehab some people, but
you can't rehab a psychopath.
He is not wanting to be rehabilitated in any way.
No.
He's not. And a lot of times they're just trying to push Christianity on the inmates, and I think that abstinence and all of these things, these purity type values in Christianity. He knew that he could use that as like a thing to like win him props in the system, I think.
And it's funny,
it was the porn. It was the impure stuff that got to me. Like, I think that is more of just him trying to manipulate
and
people.
This interview that I'm specifically talking about is so fucking gross and annoying, and the person interviewing him is actually an evangelist preacher, like one that does like TV stuff. So it's the guy himself, I'm sure, is like real cheeseball, but of course is real interested in this pornography interview. It's just him talking about how porn is bad for a fucking hour. It's so annoying, it made me want to punch him in the face, because anybody who has ever looked at any research studies on it, violent pornography does not create violence.
No.
People who already have a propensity for violence and watch violent pornography, it may reinforce what is already there, but it does not. Somebody who is non-violent and watches a violent pornography is not going to go out and do violent things.
No.
That is not a cause of violence or serial killers, but this whole interview that Ted does, that's how he approaches it. The way he talks to this guy, he's like, No. Listen, from my experience as a blah, blah, blah. Like, he just conducts himself as the expert on the matter, and it's just really gross to watch. I really fucking hated it. I hated watching it.
He's just so careless. Like, he doesn't... It seems like...
to not give a fuck.
Like, he's just pushed past any caring.
Yeah. I don't think he ever had any. That's it. It's like he doesn't, and he doesn't
I can see that.
But he also seems to be done pretending. It seems like his whole life he was pretending to care and mimicking these feelings.
At this point.
Yeah, I'm done. Like, he never seems to be disempowered. Like, he never comes across as disempowered, and it's just so weird. But lastly, I'm going to talk about the execution, because I think the execution is really interesting. People acted like it was a fucking party. They show up outside in mass, outside the prison, celebrating. They've spectators everywhere. They've got signs. They've got fucking swag for this event. They had t-shirts made. I was literally, as I was watching the footage of this, I was just writing down like the shit on the shirts and the shit on their signs, because it was so wild to me. I was like, whoa, these people are hardcore. They love the death penalty. Like, I was like, this. I mean, yeah, Ted Bundy was terrible, but the turnout for this was a little bit in poor taste. But the swag items included signs that said BBQ Bundy. Had him as like a little cook, like a little chef. He's in like a little outfit, and it's like a red imprint on a white shirt. Some of the other shirts said things like Burn Bundy Burn. So it's like, you know,
all those
catchy boom.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there's that. And it's like, it's basically a fucking circus. It's wild. There are literal fireworks. People are shooting off fireworks. They did a countdown.
After how horrified they were when he like escaped, you know, this is his escape
so
artist
happy.
Situations.
I can see them being happy and celebrating this. Like, they don't ever have to worry, because they're not even safe with him in jail. You're exactly right. The public was terrified.
Yeah.
So I get it. This was the end of a reign of terror. But the fucking literal fireworks, they counted it down like New Year's Eve. Like they did a countdown to his death. And they all celebrated and wooed and shot fireworks. So it was quite a scene, you guys. That's fucking Ted Bundy. I left out the horrific details of the crimes because there were honestly so many and so close together. Other than giving you a rough overview, like, I'm glad I didn't trigger warning too many times in here because, like, if you want to know the details of the crimes, you can find that information. This would be a 4-hour podcast if I were to go into all that detail. We really, for the purposes of what we're going to do with the chart, we really want to just get more of his personality and his approach to things and, like, more criminological and psychological perspective from this before we move into his chart. Because really nobody wants to hear the horrific things he did. If you do, like, it's not a secret. It's very easy to find. So from that, now that we've got this shit done, we're gonna chart this bitch because he's a bitch and we hate him.
All right, here we go.
We're gonna chart the biggest bitch of all time, Ted Theodore Fuckface Bundy. Let's go.
I don't think that was his middle name, Brittney.
It was, and Crowley. We looked up his original name too.
Theodore Robert Bundy.
Okay, that
Theodore
does sound
Robert
right.
Cowell Bundy.
That does sound correct. Sounds a little bit more correct than fuckface.
Yeah, you were close.
It's close to being correct. Okay.
All right, so we got another mic situation going on. More tech issues. I'm not sure why.
We have all the backup recordings, though, so we're not losing any content. We're just trying to make our way, as we all are trying to do every single day. I'm going to stop talking.
I like it. I like it a lot. All right, so now I'm pulling back up Ted's chart. Let's see. We just filmed a video for our Patreon.
We did.
And we went over, my sister came to visit. We went over her chart and mine and hers a little bit.
We had a special guest.
Ted Bundy special facts and some...
Yeah. Just kind of like behind the scenes fun chart things, fun similarities between siblings. As an only child, I had a lot of questions.
And the psychology behind that.
Yeah, we talked about psychology. We talked about Ted Bundy. We talked about astrology. We talked about chips and salsa. So, you know, it's a lot more personal than what we put out on our main page. So if you are interested in any of that fantastic content, Patreon. Okay.
Let's get into his chart now.
Because he's terrible.
All right. So, Ted Bundy. Theodore Robert Fuckface Shitface Cowell Bundy. There's too many names.
Too many names.
He was born the day after a new moon. So, his sun and moon are still in the same sign. He is a Sagittarius sun and Sagittarius moon. He has a stellium in this sign. This is all sitting here with his Mars, his South Node, and his Lilith. His rising is Leo. He also has Saturn and Pluto in Leo in retro. Both of those retrograded. He has a part of fortune there too. That's the other thing you're saying. Okay. Let's see. He also has a stellium in Scorpio, with Chiron, Jupiter, Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde, and Juno there. Let's see. That's the overview.
Okay, got it.
So, where do I want to start? My notes are a little chaotic with him.
You took mad notes while I was doing my part.
I was like,
you're a mad woman.
So I'll just kind of go as I feel called here. It may feel a little random the way I'm going through this, but one thing that I thought about right away was how he is a Sagittarius, but he's known for like, I mean, it's not really contradictory, but being a Sagittarius and also having such like persistence through, like, I don't know, he did such an impressive amount of killing in such a short amount of time, kind of, you know, like, it's a real dedication there, where sometimes people see Sagittarius and it's like, oh, they're just kind of like going with the wind and doing whatever calls to them, where he has like a consistent victims, consistent like things about his crimes, not all down all the way down to the T, but like the same type of girls,
right. His typology, his yeah.
And right. So I noticed that he is known for like a lot of that because his midheaven is in Taurus, and he's known for like some of that steadfast, like consistent, like here we go. And he has Pholus and Pallas conjunct in Capricorn, and his vertex conjunct them in Capricorn. And Pholus, it makes everything like really extra, like to the point where you can kind of lose yourself in your Pholus placement. And Pallas is the strategic energy where you're really like, it's a feminine strategic type placement, where you're really making decisions and listening to, it's kind of like deep wisdom within yourself. But for him, you know, it's just like, kind of practically laying out what he's going to do in his head and like it's like, this is an emphasis on goals.
Okay.
So he has like these really, really strong goals that can really be just so compelling to him, is what it seems like. And there's like access at like and so there's that structural component coming from those placements on his chart. He also does have his North Node in Gemini, which makes him a little more practical. He is like craving to become more practical, think more common sense, kind of be more amongst the people as he get, you know, that's what he's wanting, the direction he's wanting to go in his life. Your North Node is your life path, your destiny, where you're wanting the direction you want to go in life. So having this there, he wants to be more in the community. He also wants to become known. His North Node is in the 10th house still. So he is like fine to become well known, get that notoriety. It is his destiny to have that, even if he didn't really realize he wanted that. And a lot of that comes from him just not caring. You know, that double Sagittarius, he has that on his South Node. The thing with his Sagittarius placements are that they're all on his South Node, and whatever's on your South Node is, you know, it's something that you kind of reject in yourself. You tend to reject in yourself because it's your past. It's like what you're moving away from. It's like, well, that's my old life, you know, I want to do my North Node. Like, I don't want to do this. So, but when your main placements are on your South Node, you have Moon on your South Node. Yeah. It makes you dislike that part of yourself. It makes you kind of, you like, oh, I'm trying to move away from that. But you can't move away from that because it is you. It's a core part of yourself.
I was thinking about how that plays out on my chart. As you said, you have this on your chart, because I was like, okay, I started doing that exact thing. That's so funny.
It's really funny. And so he has his Moon there, and Mars, and Lilith, and Sun. So it's like a lot of himself he just does not care about. It makes it where he is absent in emotion. He is absent in this kind of like, and it makes this really difficult part of his chart. I see this as a really prominent issue for him. Let's see, and you know, Sagittarius is willing to really go far, and it's kind of carefree and careless anyways. And then if you're also like, oh, I just don't really have emotions, it makes it like you really are just able to do what you want without the guilt, like he's talking about.
He actually quoted himself on that. Like,
yeah.
I'm so lucky to not feel guilt like the rest of you. Like, that's basically what you fucking said.
He's willing to rely on luck and like the universe to take care of him, and he rode that out for a while. He killed a lot of people and he very laissez-faire, like, you know, I'm gonna tell him my first name. I'm not gonna wear a mask. I'm just gonna kind of show up and do my thing, and it's gonna be good. Like, that's very like Sagittarius mindset, completely. He was willing to really like figure out like how the underlying current of like how things work, and like that Scorpio nature he has with all of his Scorpio placements. He was really willing to kind of investigate and learn psychology and learn about how, like, you know, the inner workings of how these people are going to react and operate.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he did all of that just to be more manipulative, just to keep on living this other way, just to keep on being like, well, here I am, just showing up. Like, that's his only form of preparation.
And it was probably like genuinely fascinating to him, like based off these Jupiter in Scorpio, Chiron. You know, people are always motivated to learn about, like, especially with psychology. Like, I feel like if you have trauma, you are more prone to want to learn about that. And then, you know, Venus is there, Mercury, right, and those are retrogrades. They're really internalized too, like wanting to be kind of reflective on himself and to be able to use that. He's committed to it. Juno is there. Let's see, and he uses this knowledge as well. He has that thing where he plays these characters, right? Yep. He's able to do this like role play situation. He can use that knowledge with his Venus, or not Venus, what is it, Venus? His ascendant in Leo. It's like, well, I'm gonna play. Actor. Yeah, here we go. We'll play into this it's almost like a fun thing for him. And it's very casual, like, you know, Sagittarius energy comes off really casual, and then he can kind of perform. And he has this, like, psychology thing. And Scorpio also, when you have a lot of Scorpio placements, you kind of do get that feeling of, like, oh, I'm just really dark and cold. And, you know, like, I can handle the worst of the worst, like, harshest conditions of the world. Like, this, like, depressive type of thing. And it's, like, I've gone to the depths of my depression and I can, you know, it's very, like, Scorpio-y. You know, it's that death energy, that transformation, because Scorpio deals with that so much in their energetic space, where you're constantly just, things are like being killed off completely, and then you're rising again. Like this, it's very. Anyway, not to get off on a tangent, but
he did have like those big transformative time periods where it almost like he killed off and reinvented parts of himself.
And his sun sign is only at 2 degrees Sagittarius. It is cusping Scorpio, so this is he also has a flavor of Scorpio on his sun as well.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so it's very much like that. And like you said, like he was able to go to different places, and he kind of like he was a little bit like not transient, but like he lived in different like areas. He moved on, like that's also kind of really Sagittarius.
Yeah, and the higher learning stuff. He not only learned about one subject, he's like, I want to learn Chinese, and I want to go to law school, and I want to get a psychology degree. He did all these things,
and those are all very like Scorpio, Sagittarius again. His ninth house cusp is in Aries. He's very propelled to do those things, very exciting to learn more and expand further. He's got, and also, you know, the stellium in Scorpio and Sagittarius, all of that is, again, like wanting to learn how things work and go the distance and really learn, you know, higher education. Like you said, that's another note I had. Several degrees.
So intelligent. What a fucking waste. The judge actually said that to him in open court at the very end. When he was sentenced. The judge looks right fucking at him and says, I would have loved to have you practicing law in this courtroom. You would have been an amazing attorney, but you chose another path, brother. You chose another fucking path. Like,
he did.
It's such a waste when you think about all of that.
Another thing with him being kind of like more cold, and this also would have, I was just thinking, like, oh, this could have helped him in that kind of situation, is he was able to detach more. He has Ceres and Aquarius, which can, you know, that Ceres and Aquarius can, like, you almost feel more comforted being the outsider a little bit. Like, you're kind of like, you know, you want kind of that, like, distance, kind of like a cat. I sometimes joke about, like, how, like, a cat, when they want attention, they're there, and then, but they also they want to have their space.
It's like a standoffish, but not.
Kind of like how you talk about sometimes with your Venus and Aquarius.
It does that.
It's like that. So like some of that feeling, that's your foundation for love. Like you're, you know, if he was in a courtroom and he was having a battle, like if he had become a lawyer, he wouldn't have to deal with so much of that, like, oh, I feel bad for the defendant, you know.
He felt bad for no one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's very detached.
Mm-hmm.
Even in his close relationships, when you look at the relationship he had with Liz,
Mm-hmm.
which was long-term, long-standing,
Yeah.
for several years,
Mm-hmm.
and that he was able to put up the facade of, being this guy, and she had a child, so he
Mm-hmm.
basically raised a daughter. Meanwhile, one of his victims was a 12-year-old girl. That was one of the things that really messed with Liz a lot, was like, how were you doing these things?
Mm-hmm.
That was just one of the things that was just so difficult for her to get past when it all came out.
Yeah.
And, yeah, but just,
that deep deception.
as detached as he could be, he could certainly pretend, the actor, I feel like it's Leo, like he could certainly pretend to be.
That and that Sagittarius energy, he could so casually be like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's so.
That's what's going on. I'm the police officer.
Because that's
I'm gonna have to put you in some cuffs. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of charm that can come through with that Sagittarius. He also has charm coming through with that Neptune. He has Neptune in Libra, so that's kind of like a veil you can put on. It's another part of like deception as an aspect of Neptune, and having it in Libra makes it really like also kind of pleasant and calm and easygoing. That balancing nature of Libra. Libra can be very charming.
Yeah. As everybody described him that way. It's just, and when you watch him, you can see so much footage of him. It's mind-blowing knowing what he did and then watching how he conducts himself. It's like I feel like Carol was the name of the survivor who jumped out of the car that he tried to handcuff, that like basically was kind of his undoing. Mm-hmm. She's like the only person who saw that side of him and lived to tell about it. It's
wild.
Insane.
I still can't get over like how arrogant and how he's just like,
I'm gonna represent myself,
carefree, but going the distance with what he wants to do, so arrogant. I mean, that's another part of that Leo rising. It's like he gave his name. Mm-hmm. Like he was like, here, this is who I am. This is my face.
This is my car. It's broad daylight. Mm-hmm. And he had the audacity to attack. Rising. 2 women went missing within a 4-hour period from the same location.
The audacity.
And he was not found for a long time after.
And for him to also be seen as like fairly attractive.
That's
another
why he
Leo rising type of situation, and very alluring, that Scorpio energy coming through.
Cliche.
Oh
that
yeah.
Leo rising cliche. I didn't even think about that. That's funny.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly though.
We talk about it a lot too, and it totally over my head.
That's so funny. Let's see, where else did I have notes here? I almost need to cross off the ones I already said.
Yeah, cross them off.
The Scorpio stellium also, I was gonna say, it also speaks to how much sexual components there were to his crimes, and how he was always talking about how he's such a sexual type of person. That's just such a Scorpio thing. Scorpionic stellium issue coming through, I think.
I think that sounds pretty on brand.
Literally. I don't even want to get into that too much because it's just gross.
Yeah, he's very gross. We don't need to talk about how gross.
Yeah, because I could break down some of that. I don't really want to. Let's see.
Oh, he's so gross.
Because he has that intensity there, but also that absence of emotion coming in, the intensity from Scorpio. But then, it's he's really easy. It's really easy for him to hide that part of himself.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is in conflict. There's squares down to his Saturn retrograde and Pluto retrograde, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in a minute. That's all in his 12th house in Leo. So there was some issues there, obviously. Saturn squares, always very difficult. Saturn square Jupiter in Scorpio, square Ceres, and there's another square to his midheaven. It's just very, Saturn squares are so difficult. What am I getting out? Again, my notes are crazy.
There's a lot going on.
So then, he's got with the absence of feeling, there's a lot of this empowerment too. Like with that Lilith placement also being with his Sagittarius stellium going on, where he feels like, well, I'm able to like do something about it. You know, I'm able to like manipulate the situation into my favor.
They're gonna put me in jail
because of my absence of emotion.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm only here for now. Like he doesn't seem to. It doesn't seem to deter him whatsoever.
No, it does not.
That's what's so wild to me. It just. He's like, it's fine. I'm not gonna be here long anyway. I'm gonna starve myself and squeeze through the ceiling and walk out. It's gonna be fine.
I can also one little side note I made. The downhill skiing.
Oh, I forgot.
I was like, what a Sagittarius type of hobby.
It's so random.
like, oh yeah, we're gonna just go on these little trips and do like downhill ski. Like that is just so. It just seems
it
like
feels adventurous.
It is very adventurous. Gotta think on your feet. We're gonna ride the snow. Like it's very like all right.
Yeah, it feels
we're gonna go with.
It feels. I've been skiing.
It's very active. Yeah. It's very Sagittarius type of. It reminds me of like when people also take up like rock climbing when they're like climbing these big boulders. Like it's a similar vibe to me. I think it ties in. On his north and south node, you can see a lot of his parental issues.
Okay.
This was like a whole thing.
Yeah, I'm excited for this.
Where do I want to start? Obviously, not knowing who his mom was until later in life, kind of shows up as this moon on the south node situation. And it being like she felt he views his mom as like having an issue with her own empowerment, like not being able to claim her own child with that Lilith conjunction and Mars and not doing what she needed to do, not being able to fight. Like he had these are all the things he felt were wrong with his mom, that were absent with his mom. He felt his mom was absent in a way, even though she was there. It was like not who he thought.
Right.
Which also comes up as his Chiron in his third house, where you can see kind of like the family and like siblings and things like that. Where Chiron, you can see like trauma there. And his Chiron is also in Scorpio. Trauma with like deception, lies, and also probably sexuality, where I'm wondering if he was violated or not as a child. Why that, I don't know.
Yeah, there's not anything that that he's absolutely never said anything about it publicly. Right. And it's not, or
even just feeling that his mom could have been. I don't know.
That was the talk.
There's so much we don't know.
That was some of the rumors, was the relationship possibly, allegedly, maybe, that he was the illegitimate child of his biological grandfather. Which, if that is the case, and that's who he's spending time around, a lot of times, child predators don't differentiate between gender. They don't necessarily care. It's just the young, immature victim and the submissiveness of the young person that they're attracted to. So, that if that were plausible, it's a possibility. There's so many possibilities. And I feel like, for whatever reason, something tells me he wouldn't talk about it. If
I don't think he would.
He just something about it.
Why would he? Why would he?
It doesn't serve him. If it doesn't serve him, I don't feel like he's gonna talk about it. But then again, nobody expected him to confess to all the murders either. So I don't know.
I feel like he knew there was no way he'd get away with it at a certain point.
Well, I mean, he waited
might as well give it up.
He waited till the night before they killed him. to confess.
Yeah, might as well give it up.
So that's what's so weird is he didn't have to. So I'm wondering, like, I don't know, maybe just to kind of have the legacy of it all. I don't know. It's interesting. It's a whole thing.
I could see a lot of different things. That Leo rising, just maybe even wanting the attention, wanting the fame of it.
I've already done it all. I might as well be infamous. I don't know. That's. Then I don't even know that he really cared about that either. I don't think he cared about anything. It's so weird. He's such a weirdo.
So
such a creep.
More with those parents. The dad stuff is shown with the sun sign and the Saturn. Which also I see Saturn sometimes as like a grandfather figure, so that makes this more interesting. So the sun also being conjunct the South Node, again, like an absent father dynamic. This is all trying his Saturn placement, Saturn in the 12th house, again, like something that, and it's conjunct Pluto, it's like there's this intensity there, but like cage feeling to it, and like, because the 12th house is kind of how you are like, you put yourself in a cage. It can also show like hidden talents, which I thought was something interesting with like the Pluto being there and Saturn, how it was like he had this like really cold death type of situation going on with his life. You know, if you're going to consider that a talent, I don't know. But something he made useful in his life for sure. Also, what showed up as his him being imprisoned, another 12th house thing. So I think a lot of this ties down to the father issue and the grandfather part potentially, because there's just so much going on with his chart related to that and like his parents and the problems with his parents. Because let's see what else. Having that like horrible, intense grandfather, but him also being like, "Oh, but it was good." Like it's
great.
It's that like it's very like Sun conjunct South Node, and it's very Saturn in Leo in the 12th house. You know, it's like very like, oh, it's good, but it's horrible. Like, you know, it's a lot of that energy so like double entendre on his chart, which makes me think it's like really intense. Because I think when something's really strong in people's lives, it can show up in multiple ways on their chart, through their chart. And that's why I think when you listen to people do readings, sometimes like they'll say the same things, but they'll be saying it because of different reasons on their chart, and it's like they picked up on it, like because it shows up in multiple places.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay.
Well, like this is everywhere, so. Yeah, you've seen that with a lot of people, like that we've talked about on this podcast, like. I specifically remember Eileen Warnos being one that you were like, this is everywhere. Like, you feel like it's everywhere. Everything bad, it's everywhere. It's all over the place. Like,
unknown father, like, mystery. Very, you know, that Pluto energy is very mysterious. It's all retrograded. Like, it's... This is stuff that you don't get to, like, have handed to you. It's not things handed to you. Oh, my God. Words. It's things that you don't have like handed to you in life, like the way that they typically show up.
The cards were dealt wrong to this person. When you say like they were dealt a bad hand, like sometimes with people, like
it's gonna take a lot. It's if he was gonna find out who his dad was, or if he was, you know, maybe he did know. I don't know. It wouldn't have been until much later in life. But obviously, I don't think that was I don't think that was something he actually pursued to figure out. But if he was going to figure that out, I think it would have been later in life.
His dad probably saw him on the news for all of these horrific crimes and was like, no, glad I ran away from that. Or like, you know.
Oh my God.
Total speculation. Total speculation on my part. There's no validity to that statement.
Whew, it's getting late here, guys. Sorry.
I know. We had a break in between where we did Patreon things.
Well, and he wants to move more away from this energy of the bad parent situation. He wants to move towards his North Node, like I said earlier, which is in Gemini. He wants to have this more like adaptive, quick, like multitasking, practical, short-term pursuits kind of thing going on. And it's conjunct Uranus as well, so he wants to be able to be like, his individual self and do his own thing, and it has retrograde as well on his chart. He has several retrogrades: Mercury retrograde, Venus retrograde, Uranus retrograde, Saturn retrograde, and Pluto retrograde. Ooh. And a heavy South Node conjunction. A lot of things are very internalized for him, and these are probably things that he never really dealt with in his life. I don't think. Because why? He had I don't think he had any reason to really want to deal with them, especially, that Moon South Node thing, why? And the Mars is there too, that affects his ambition, why?
That is something that Stephanie Brooks said that he struggled with, which is why she broke up with him. You don't need motivation. Then he suddenly found all this motivation for a bunch of fucked up shit and became almost overachiever in a lot of different ways, but apparently motivation was previously a struggle.
I could see it.
So there was a shift in there.
Yeah, because then it became about his compulsions rather than a genuine drive.
That's so accurate. Yeah.
But him having there's so much with this. I can't. We gotta keep moving. His trial. I'm looking towards the 7th house with this, also somewhat of the 8th house a little bit, because it was it turned into execution, and jail with 12th house. So his 7th house cusp is Aquarius. There is a square. I thought this was interesting. There was it also shows, first of all, Aquarius being kind of that. Kind of edgy, laid back type of vibe. It kind of reminds me of kind of how he dealt with the trial a little bit, some of the attitude he brought to the trial. Mm-hmm. Also, it was trine Uranus, which is more of that energy where it's I'm, I'm gonna be my spontaneous, kind of whatever I feel unique, individualistic self, and kind of a little bit colder about it, because I have this. It's almost like he looked at it from a higher type of view, a balcony view, kind of well, this is the trial. I'm this character in this trial.
I'm gonna throw a wedding in here.
He's yep. And that's the thing I was gonna say. He has a square over to Juno. And this Juno placement was also trying his 8th house, so it's tied with this. Juno's commitments, it's marriages, and it is in Scorpio, so it shows this tie to how he used this trick with the court system in his trial, to have a marriage, which is so lovely. Venus is also there, don't worry. So this is laid out great for him to be able to work that in. Let's see. Past that, we've got some execution stuff.
I'm definitely excited to hear about what you see with what I witnessed.
Without even looking at the death chart yet.
Okay.
His 8th house is a Pisces cusp, so it makes me really think about how this was so romanticized by so many people, and fantasize how people got so wrapped up in the excitement of this. It's almost just
did.
In another world.
You gotta watch the footage of it. It's nuts. It's a concert. Mm-hmm. It seriously is like a concert. It's really something. People are so excited.
They were devoted to it.
It's a little tacky.
He has that's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And this marriage also gave him benefits through the death row experience with the 8th house. How he became a father.
I forget about
a father in jail again with that Saturn in the 12th house. There's a trine from that marriage he had over to his 8th house. It's just a lot more of that showing up again. Let's see. His trial, when did they decide I guess his sentencing would have been
right. So the sentencing hearing is actually where he did his whole marriage. So
that's what I
sentenced to death while
to the electric chair at that stage. And so that's what I thought was interesting with the Aquarius placement. It's like very innovative and we're gonna use
technology to kill you.
Also, on his square, or there's a square from Uranus to his 8th house cusp. Again, technology. Wow. Wow.
Fantastic.
Also, I think this marriage thing he had really just entertained him really well.
Absolutely.
During the end. Like, you can see that on the chart for sure with that trine over to Juno again. And Venus on his 8th house cusp. It's like, wow.
Yeah, it really did seem like it was just a thing for him to do. It's not even like...
You could also interpret Pluto in the 12th house as his death in jail. Alright, death chart.
Yes, I'm so excited.
Should we pull it up alone? No, I want to pull it up against his chart. That's what I want to do.
I'm just going to sit back and watch. I like how death's in all caps.
Yeah, it makes it easier when I'm trying to look over stuff really fast. Okay. We've got what is happening in the 8th house. So we have Ceres in the 8th house.
Interesting.
Where is the ascendant of the death chart? I didn't look at this beforehand, so you'll have to give me a second.
There's so much going on with the synastry charts. Like, every time I see it, I'm just like... It's hard to tell what's what for me.
Oh, the midheaven is flipped. Yeah, so there was his death was a big deal. He's got midheaven opposition, and the midheaven opposition hits his Scorpio, conjunct Pluto. So very like death focused. Right at that time of death, people knew about it. Like people really knew about it. That's crazy. That was a well-known death. That's what that looks like on the chart. It was Aquarius season when he died. There's something going on with Ceres then, because the Sun was conjunct with Ceres. He had Ceres in the 8th house. Okay, so he had the rising sign of his death chart is conjunctus Pholus, which is was the first thing I looked at when I saw his chart, was that Pholus placement that I mentioned earlier, where you just get like really carried away with stuff, whether it's good or bad. You just get super carried away. It's really tied in with that, and that is sextile over to his Scorpio stellium. Again, with it being Aquarius season, I really like that with the electric chair.
There's so much going on this chart. Okay.
And we got... Yeah, there's a lot going on. I have extra aspects turned on with some of the house cusps right now, so that's part of it. That's why there's extra the lines.
Okay.
And it's taking me longer.
Like, there are so many lines happening.
There are a lot of lines. Oh, hey. Alright, so his 8th house cusp of his death chart is in his 1st house of his natal chart. So the house of death came over his rising into like right where, and the moon was in his 1st house at the time of death. The South Node was in his 1st house, and Juno. So some of the prominent things on his mind and on his, in his karmic space where, you're taking in like your karmic lessons, the energy kind of hitting him directly right then is stuff that comes up in your 1st house. And so those were his absence of emotion issues, literally another moon conjunct South Node situation, And you know, that marriage that he had.
Golly.
Like, well, I had a kid, I got married, right?
I've really accomplished everything.
I
feel
was
like
really
that
funny.
is how you probably...
And you said the night before he confessed?
I was actually going to ask if you see anything about that. Yeah, the night before his execution, I'm not sure how many hours before.
We'll say like evening, like 8. I'll put roughly 8 p.m.
It's interesting because they normally do executions in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting they did this one at 7 a.m. So it makes me wonder. I also didn't look up his last meal, and I normally do. I want to know his last meal. Like, there's so many things I want to, like, know about now. I also could see him being the type to refuse a last meal, just to be that way. For whatever reason, that feels kind of on brand, like something he might do.
Like, whatever.
Or being ridiculous and getting something like a black coffee. Like, I can see him doing something bitchy like that.
Uh-huh. Yeah, he's got, that's something else I mentioned earlier when we were talking. He's got like this sense of humor, Sagittarius Scorpio humor, where it's like, we're going to make light of things, but we're going to do it in a really dark way. Right. But everything is funny.
We actually talked about that on the Patreon episode. So if you want to hear the detail about that, about some of the crime details, we talk specifically about that on Patreon.
Oh, yeah.
So we did talk about it, just not here.
I know, that's what I was referencing.
Nice.
I feel like, it only moves, the moon is still in his first house. During the evening, the ascendant would have come over his ascendant again. Between 7 and 8, 9 p.m. Somewhere in there. So there is, that makes me think maybe around then, since they said the evening, because that's when
plausible.
That's when it would have also been hitting the moon at that time, so his like direct energy would have been really hitting that place of emotion and absence of emotion. So I just really think that's interesting.
I like seeing it spin.
The moon was also in Leo that evening, so it really just, again, plays into, like, that ascendant energy, where the next morning when he was executed, it had moved into Virgo. Still in his first house, but it was in Virgo at that point. Right on the south node, like his natal moon. How lovely.
Lovely.
How lovely. Let's see. Anything else?
I mean, I guess for me, like, the thing that I was hoping would really show up, and I guess it kind of did, was just the outer reaction. The reaction of the public to his execution was, I mean, you did mention it, but I felt like it was going to show up in a
Jupiter is in his 10th house. Again, that's like more well-known. Pholus is in his 10th house. Again, like, oh my god, this is amazing, exaggerated. Pholus exaggerates, which was also conjunct his north node. So yeah, there is a public. I think I'm just not sounding very excited because I'm tired.
And I guess that was the thing that I just wanted. I feel like the only
definitely showed up in his death chart. This is a very well known death.
Yeah,
like this is very well known.
I think the only other thing that I would really be interested in knowing about Ted Bundy himself, like not even his death chart, was just kind of like the levels of aggression, because we didn't see it as the public. Like, nobody blatantly saw it. His victims saw it. And the level, you can see it in the evidence.
I think it's
the types of crimes and just kind of where that aggression, obviously it feels like Mars, but I'm like, where is, like where is...
I think it's in his Scorpio.
It is in Scorpio. Okay.
I think it's that. It's because he's especially if he's taking out this all on similar looking women. I think this is something in his head that he has like focused on this one type of person, this one aesthetic of a person, where he can like see a similar person and put that on that girl, that woman, like make it about them when it's not really about them. I think he's got revenge in a way that he's taking out, and some of it's sexualized, and it's just very Scorpio.
Okay. Yeah.
And Scorpio is also ruled by Mars. It's Pluto and Mars.
Yeah.
So you've got both of those, like, really, and when a Scorpio gets revenge, oh my god, it's very intense. I think And then, that with taking it to the furthest extent with that Sagittarius energy, it's also a fire sign. Again, there's Jupiter involved. I just think it shows up, but it doesn't show up in the same way that some of our other cases have.
That's what's so interesting. But he also wasn't known for being aggressive in his real life,
right?
Like some
because
of his
it's
other
only
people.
when the intensity comes out. It's only it's directed.
Yeah,
like Scorpio isn't just out to be like mean to everybody. Like
it's so targeted.
It's targeted. And I think that's where this is coming through. Like you wouldn't see it unless you were the target.
Wow.
Okay,
I really wanted to just kind of play
on
that.
I like when you ask those things.
It's the things that I, as a person who in depth studied the killer, would love to dig.
You want to dig into their mind. That's what helps me to know what to talk about.
The other thing, where was his Venus at again? I don't remember.
Scorpio.
Okay, again,
retrograde in Scorpio.
It's just the type of relationships that he had were so interesting because even when they were committed and long term, they were still so empty.
Scorpio Venus is very intense.
Yeah.
And but the thing with they are going to be empty because what's part of like a relationship is that emotional connection, and he is absent there. Mm-hmm. So he has that where with his heart space stuff, with the Venus stuff, and it's like more of like an attachment, I think, than an emotional bond. Even though Scorpio Venus usually wants that deep, intense connection. So without the emotional part of that, you want loyalty. He wants to know that he can rely on this person to be there for him, but it's not really an emotional bond. It's more of like a manipulative. He's leaning on the lower frequencies of Scorpio, I think, where you're manipulating to get people to care for you. I don't think that if you're not having genuine emotional bonds, then you can't access the higher frequencies of Scorpio energy. In my opinion, you can't have the evolved Scorpio energy without processing any emotion ever.
Right.
So
that's so interesting. Yeah, and it does make sense because when you look at the first relationship with Stephanie, and that became his fixation for the other crimes with her appearance and her thing, and it was this rejection and it was also this revenge, how dare you reject me? I'm just gonna enact this on everybody else.
Yes, that's very Scorpio Venus. I've been hurt, I'm going to take it out on every other person, similar for the rest of my life. Wow. That's very very that follows suit with that energy, and this is emphasized on his chart. It's magnified. He has Jupiter there. He has, this is very internalized as well. Like I said earlier, it's very it's in retrograde. His mindset is focused on this with Mercury here, also in retrograde. This is his trauma. He has Chiron in Scorpio. There's just a lot of Scorpio stuff. I think and that shows up really intense.
He seems so intense.
Yeah, you just wouldn't see that necessarily unless you were involved with him on that level. Right. And also that's another thing with Scorpio energy. It doesn't bear all to the world. It's not vulnerable around everybody. They conceal a lot of themselves. Mm-hmm. That Scorpio, it's and his sun sign is cusping Scorpio too, so it's a lot of concealment on things. I'm sure there's a lot about him that nobody really just knows,
right?
Or that he didn't let anyone continue to know.
I don't think he ever let anybody actually know him, because I feel like he didn't have a real genuine sense of self necessarily. No. It was just always about kind of getting what he wanted, not necessarily I don't know.
And that's more in the absence of his internal self and the absence of himself. I'd be with that South Node stuff. I'd be curious to see other charts with Sun and Moon conjunct South Node. And how those people are coping. But
it's interesting. I can't think of anything else specific to ask. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about on your notes or anything?
I think I got through all my notes.
Yeah.
You know, I think we might want to wrap it up because I know this is a longer episode.
Yeah.
Already.
But that happens whenever we talk about super heavy hitters that have committed extensive amounts of crimes, and there's a lot. And when we have death charts, and we have more than one chart to look at, like, it's always going to be a little bit longer. But thank you guys, as always, for being here, for listening, for engaging with us. We got another heavy hitter coming up for the next episode. So we're also going to continue with our Morgan Nick case updates as that unfolds. But in the meantime, make sure that you like, follow, subscribe, get on our Patreon, hang out with us, interact with us. We try to do cool, fun shit to keep you happy. So please love yourselves, take care of yourselves, and continue to chart all the bitches in your life. We'll see you later. Goodbye. Hand motions. Bye. Bye.